I want to talk to you guys. This is week 2 in our series on the Beatitudes. And as a young man and a young Christian, I wasn't sure, even as a kid, what Beatitudes meant. I just kind of assumed it was how we were supposed to behave, Beatitudes. That was just kind of how I put it together. But when we're talking about being blessed, the Beatitudes, that word comes from the Latin word, the root that means supreme blessedness. And it comes from a sermon that Jesus preached in Matthew chapter 5. It's not just blessed. It's not just feeling good. It's not just having good. It's supreme blessedness. And Jesus showed us 8 different characteristics of people who were blessed. And over the course of the series, we're going to look at 5 of them. Last week, we saw, blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they will be filled. Next week, it's going to be, blessed are the peacemakers. But before we get into today's beatitude that we're going to talk about, I have a strange, it might seem strange for some, but I want to see a show of hands. How many of you have ever been robbed? Like someone broke into your house or your car, you've had something stolen, you have been robbed. It's not a good feeling. It's really not a good feeling. I've had 3 DVD players stolen out of different vehicles that we had in different places that we've lived or visited. One was at my parents' house. We had 2 kids at the time, and we had DVD player on the back of each of the seats, and both of them were stolen one night while we were at my parents' house. Had other things stolen, iPods. But when we moved to Daytona, where I pastored my first church, I was only there for about 10 days when something happened in the neighborhood, and it really kind of struck fear in us of something that we were experiencing. And we were in a bad part of town. And the neighborhood was, there was a lot of crime and drugs, and we knew that going in, because I didn't know how bad, but I knew that it was a bad neighborhood and that the people there needed Jesus, and that I was being sent there to be a light in the darkness. But while we were there, the house was in bad shape, so we were trying to renovate that, and we were staying in the fellowship hall of the church, and the fellowship hall had no windows, and I was grateful because the police locked down all the streets in our neighborhood. Someone had stolen a car and was going on some kind of like joyride. I didn't know it at the time. All I knew was that they had the streets locked down, and there was a helicopter searching, trying to find someone who was on the run. And I was getting nervous because I wasn't sure what was going on. I put the family in the fellowship hall and told them to lock the doors. And I'm looking out the window in the hallway trying to figure out what's going on. I heard someone banging on a door. Sounded like it was the side door of the church or over at our house. Well, I called the police, and I'm on the phone with them. I told them right where I was. And then all of a sudden, as I'm looking out the window, this was about 11:30 at night. It went from dark at 11:30 to noon brightness because that helicopter hit its floodlight, boom, right on my yard. And it ended up being somebody who was not trying to rob us. But I guess they eventually caught the person. But it was a very difficult feeling. I wanted to be the man because I had experienced being robbed in the past. I wanted to be the man of the house, and it was my responsibility to protect my family and to protect my home. And mothers understand the mama bear instinct. Don't let anyone get around your kids because the mama bear will come out and you want to protect your kids. And in our culture today, we do protect our kids. In fact, we're applauded for protecting our kids physically. People put helmets on them and elbow pads before they send them out to check the mail. You put a bubble wrap or those egg carton foam things to keep their kids safe. Well, when I was a kid, we picked on kids whose moms made them wear a helmet. I rode my bike barefooted. I never wore shoes. I could walk across the hot pavement and would never feel it. But now, as a parent myself, I don't let my kids leave the house without shoes. What are you doing? You could step on something. You would get tetanus. We'd have to go get stitches. So we do good to protect our kids physically. But in our culture, when you try to protect their heart and their morals, we're considered overprotective. You know, there's another word. You're not a mother, you're a smother. You're smothering your kids if you are too concerned about all that. But we get applauded for protecting them physically. Not only the physical nature, but we need to protect their purity of their hearts. We need to protect God actually calls us to protect the purity of their hearts. And just as I've been robbed physically, I believe that we have a spiritual enemy who wants to rob us of purity. He wants to break in. He wants to steal. He wants to kill. He wants to destroy our innocence and our trust. Jesus was very clear in the beatitude that we're talking about today. How is a man blessed? How do we become #blessed? Matthew 5:8. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. The Greek word for heart there is the word cardio. Now, we understand cardio because in our culture of fitness, cardio means having to do with the heart. You do cardio at the gym. You're working that muscle in your cardiovascular system, the muscle that pumps the blood throughout your body. And so anything relating to the heart, cardiac, that all comes from that root word. And Jesus was using this as a metaphor. He wasn't saying, blessed are those who have a pure organ that pumps blood through your veins. Which I will say, though, blessed are those who have a pure organ that pumps blood through your veins. You know, we've had some people who experienced that this past week. They got a little bit more open and so that their blood could flow better. But he was using this as a metaphor to describe the emotions and the feelings and the inner self. And he said, blessed are the pure in heart. When he said that, he was talking about attitudes, motives, and thoughts towards others. And for our purposes, I want to narrow the scope down today, and I want to talk about moral purity, and want to apply that to our lives. So before we move on, I want us to say this together. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Yes. You ever hear someone talk when they're talking about somebody else, and they say, well, they have a good heart. They're not necessarily Christian, but they have a good heart. And the reality is that it becomes a common saying, but it's not true. It's not true of any of us. It's not true of those who aren't Christian, but they are good people. It's not true of any of us who are in Christ. We don't have a good heart because without Jesus, there's no such thing as a pure heart. Without Jesus, there is no purity of heart. Jeremiah chapter 17, beginning in verse 9. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? I, the Lord, search the heart. I test the mind, even to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his doings. The heart is deceitful above all things. In Ephesians, the Apostle Paul said something about those who were Gentiles and who had drifted from their faith, who were non-believers. And this is the passage that I'm going to focus a lot on today. I'm going to reference this back a number of times, so I want you to get this in your spirit. Ephesians 4, beginning in verse 18. Having their understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart. They are darkened in their understanding. They are alienated, or they are separated from the life that God wants them to have. Why? Because of ignorance. They don't even realize it. Because their hearts have grown hard to the things that matter the most. They are darkened in their understanding. You ever walk into a dark room and you almost trip over something that's there? But after a while, your eyes begin to adjust. You begin to know where things are, and you can see better. And no, we can't see as good as we could if the light was on, but our eyes begin to adjust. Your pupils dilate to take in as much light as little areas of light, little beams of light from little things like the light on the cable box, or a night light in a hallway. All of those things contribute so that after a while you grow used to the darkness and you are able to navigate without tripping. Could it be that so many people we love are separated from the life of God because we've been darkened in our understanding? Sure, we have a functional ability to navigate life without tripping and falling, but we're living in darkness and we've grown used to it. And because of our ignorance, our hearts have hardened, and we don't even recognize that we're missing the goodness of God because we've allowed so much impurity into our lives, and we didn't even realize it. The NIV puts it this way: having lost all sensitivity, they've given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity. I believe that version of this scripture hits the heart of our culture better than almost any other. Having lost all sensitivity, our culture is giving itself over to all sorts of sensuality and indulging in every kind of impurity. We love our families. We want to protect our children. We would never give a bottle of poison to a baby and allow him to drink it. We would never let our kids jump headfirst off of a diving board into an empty pool. Yet we allow them to have unlimited access to a mobile device where they can get into anything and everything that we never want them to see, and that is normal. Now, I'm okay with my role as the mean or the out-of-touch dad. I have a 16-year-old and a 15-year-old and now a 13-year-old. So I have 3 teenagers in the house. I'll receive all the prayers you want to throw my way. 2 of them are girls, so whoo. But I'm okay with my role being the mean dad that doesn't allow his teenagers to have social media. Because I don't want their understanding to become darkened, because the ways of the world that we have made things that at certain points were abhorrent, it's now normal. What one generation permits, the next generation embraces. And could it be that one of the reasons we're not as blessed as we could be is because our hearts have been hardened? We have been darkened in our understanding, and without even knowing it, we've lost sensitivity, and we're now indulging in every kind of evil because that's the norm. So what's going to be different in our lives? Well, if you missed last week, there's a couple of things that are going to be highlighted throughout this message series over the next few weeks. We're going to be more than just a Christian in name. If you are a Christian in name, you are living, you say that Jesus is alive, but you live as if he doesn't exist. So we're Christian in name only, but we need to be more than that. We need to live Christ-centered lives. There's a difference in saying I believe in God and living like Jesus is first in your life in every way. People who are Christian in name only have no problem saying, yeah, I believe in God. And Jesus is a big part of my life. Oh yeah, Jesus, he's with me, man. He's a big part of my life. I'm a big fan of Jesus. Jesus doesn't need any fans. He needs followers. Jesus isn't part of my life. Jesus is my life. And if you have a Christ-centered life, you can't imagine life without him. I'm desperate for him. I'm lost without him. The air that I breathe, I don't want to spend a moment outside his presence. And if you want to be blessed like Jesus said in this passage, and we want to see God, then we need to live according to his word. And that's exactly what's being said in Psalm 119. Beginning in verse 9, it said, how can a young person stay on the path of purity? You know, it says young person. I don't like to add to the scriptures, but just because you might not consider yourself a young person doesn't exempt yourself from the path of purity. How can a young person stay on the path of purity? With all the temptations in the world, how can a young person stay on the path of purity? Well, here's what Hallmark movies tell us. Just follow your heart. Just follow your heart. It'll end with you guys kissing in the snow. And hey, I ain't preaching against Hallmark movies. If I did, my mama would never talk to me again. And I love my mama. And she loves her some Hallmark Christmas movies. There was Christmas in July a couple months ago, and I'm like, hey, I know how this ends. They get together, you know. The guy who is the girl's best friend, she realizes at the end that he was her love of her life all along. And she's like, I know how it ends, but I like it anyway. Just follow your heart. Eventually, everything will work out. Listen to me, that is the worst advice you could give anybody. Absolute worst advice. The follow your heart thing, not the watching the Hallmark movie thing. I'm going to step out of this because I'm really going to get myself in trouble. Mama, if you're watching this, I love you. I do. You can watch your Hallmark movies all day. Don't follow your heart. Your heart is deceitful. I've seen way too many marriages end because someone followed their heart right out of their own marriage and into the relationship with somebody else. Well, let me tell you another lie of the enemy. You just can't control who you love. I just don't love him anymore. I love him. I just don't love her. She doesn't treat me like I want to be treated, and this one does. So I just can't control who I love. You can control who you love, and if you put God first, all that will tend to work itself out. But if you put this first, your own self first, your own flesh first, then it's going to lead you in the wrong direction. Don't follow your heart. How can we stay pure? Again, how can a young person stay on the path of purity? It goes on to say, by living according to your word. Verse 10, I seek you with all my heart. Do not let me stray from your commands. It doesn't say, I seek you with part of my heart and that woman over there with the other part. I seek you with all my heart and I seek my own self with the rest of my heart because I got to save some for me. Let's do this morning. Let's acknowledge that just maybe our eyes have grown accustomed to the darkness, that our hearts might have been hardened, and we don't even see the ways that we've let impurity become part of our lives because it's so commonplace anymore. Everywhere we look, there are things that, I was watching something the other day, and we only have the one TV at our house in mine and Lindsay's room, so the kids, if we're watching something, they're sitting on my bed. I'm watching something that we had recorded, and I exited out of it, and it went to live TV. Well, what happened? I was watching a baseball game earlier. The baseball game was over, and what was on after the baseball game, immediately they started talking about something that I didn't want my kids hearing what they were talking about. It was on TBS. It was not on this channel that you would expect, but they started saying things. And Lindsay's like, kids, y'all need to, and I'm like, yeah, I'm getting it. Because all of that impurity just comes in and it becomes commonplace. So how can we live and how can we practically create a culture of purity in our lives? It won't happen by accident. We have to be intentional in the way that we're living in order to protect not just our children, but ourselves. So we create a culture of purity. 3 things. The first one, get your own heart right. I don't care if you're 18 or 88. I believe that you set the tone for the relationships around you. Above all else, Solomon says this in Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. When you get on an airplane and they show the video of what you're supposed to do in case of an emergency, you have to go through it every time. There's this part of the video that says, should the cabin lose air pressure, an oxygen mask will fall down from above you. Secure the mask on yourself first, then help the person next to you if they're struggling. Why? Because if you're always focused on getting them, then you're not getting what you need, and eventually you may pass out, you may struggle. This is what would happen if the cabin loses pressure. Spiritually speaking, get your own heart right. Get everything secured around yourself first, then worry about what's going on with your kids. Because if you're just worried, I need my kids to behave good, but the example that you're setting for them is one of unrighteousness and one of impurity, they're going to look at that and see the inconsistency, and they're going to follow the world, and they're not going to follow the Father. If there are conversations, we need to pray these prayers. If there are conversations, God, that are impure, convict me. If I'm thinking things, Lord, that are impure, convict me of them. If I'm allowing things in my home that are impure, God, convict me. Show me. If I've got relationships, God, that are taking me down more than bringing me up, if they're leading me in the paths of sin, show me. If I'm being entertained by things that are wrong to you, God, show me. Help me get my heart right first. Number 2, focus on the heart. In other words, all we want is the behavior, but we forget to focus on the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7, the Lord does not look at things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Jesus was a fanatic about the heart. He was always talking about the heart. In the Old Testament, it said, don't murder. All right, well, that's good. I haven't killed anybody, so I'm good, right? Jesus took it a step further. And not only did he take it a step further, he took it way further. What did he say? Not about don't kill somebody. You should not even hate. If you hate someone, you've already committed murder in your heart. Whoa, pump the brakes, Jesus. No, I'm following the word. The word says don't murder, and I didn't murder anybody. And Jesus is saying, yeah, but you kind of did if you hate them. The Old Testament says, do not commit adultery. Well, I'm good. I've stayed faithful to my wife for all my years, and I have never, ever had any relations with any other woman. Jesus said, if you look lustfully upon a woman, you've already committed adultery in your heart. Oh, Jesus, man, you're stepping all over my toes here. I'm not cheating on my wife, so everything's okay. And Jesus is saying it's not about the behavior, it's about the heart. It's about what's going on in here. He hammered the Pharisees who had the outward behavior right. On the outside, they looked good. So the problem is the outside of your cup and your dish is clean, but inside is filthy. What side of the bowl do you eat? You eat from the inside. The inside is what's important. If I'm trying to fix a bowl of cereal in the morning and my bowl, before I put the cereal in, it falls off the counter, if it lands on the outside, you know what? I'm going to make sure, okay, I'm good. I'll still use that bowl. But if it lands like with the rim down or there's something that goes in it, that thing's got to be washed. And I'll just scrub it. You got to get the inside clean. It's the inside that's most important. So when we're working with people, we don't want to just settle for outward submission when there's still an inward rebellion. Because that's not, if all you want is the behavior, then there's nothing that's happening changed on the inside. If you just condition your children, if you condition those who you are over, if you condition even yourself that it's the behavior that people want to see, you're creating a culture of good actors. Because if it ain't clean in here, eventually it's going to come out. Because out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Right actions come from a right heart. First, you get your own heart right. Second, you focus on the heart. Third, you pursue perfect purity of the heart. I don't always use alliteration, but when it's a P, it just kind of flows. Perfect purity. Pursue perfect purity. And I use the word pursue here because we can't achieve it on our own. Perfection is not something that we can ever have without Jesus being involved. But with the help of the power of God, we can pursue perfect purity. Why perfect purity? Isn't that raising the standard a little bit high? Perfection is you're just saying that perfection is unattainable. Because anything less than perfect purity is not purity. Anything less than perfection is not purity. And I'll tell you, there are people who use the word perfect a lot that don't understand what the word means. Because anything that is not pure is not perfect. We pursue perfect purity in our lives. Ephesians 5:3, but among you, there must not even be a hint of sexual immorality or any kind of impurity or of greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. A hint of sexual immorality or any kind of impurity or greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. So, if you're at the gym and a girl walks by who's not wearing very much and you sneak a peek, is that a hint of impurity? A hint. You're browsing on the internet and you see something that you know you shouldn't be spending a whole lot of time looking at, but you allow your mind to dwell on it for maybe a few seconds longer than you should. Is that a hint? Yes. Don't want to leave out the other one there because it's not all about sexual sin or of greed. A hint of greed. Well, I really was going to give in the offering this week. I was going to give some to missions, but I want to go out to Azteca, and Azteca ain't cheap, so I'm going to keep a little bit this back for me, and God, I'll make up for it later. Is that a hint of greed? When I was a youth pastor, I did this illustration. I did it a few times. I was youth pastor at a number of different churches. My MO as a youth pastor is I was the guy that would go somewhere for about a year, and then I would get called into the office and told, "Brother, I'm sorry, we just can't afford to pay you anymore." Okay, well, here we go again. So I'd move my family all around, but during that time, I'd use this illustration. It was very effective. People remembered it, and you'll see why in just a second. People remembered when I did this message on sin, because what I did is I would go and I would make brownies. I would get a big old batch of brownies for some, and the last church that I was youth pastor at, I was there for 3 years. That was my longest term as youth pastor anywhere, and I had built relationships with the kids and with the parents, and it was a great time. And so I did this message, and I made this big old pan of brownies. We had like 65, 75 kids in there, and so there were brownies all over the place. But what I did was I went and got a diaper. I opened up that dirty diaper, and I took something that was in the diaper, some dark matter, and I put it in the brownie mix when I was making the brownies. Oh, this is gross. It's going to be gross, but I'm telling you, it was effective. And so I mixed the brownie mix, and it was bad for a minute, but then the chocolate smell took over. And so I baked the brownies, and the brownies came out of the oven. Oh, they smelled so good. I cut the brownies. I put the brownies on a platter. I took the platter over to our youth room, and I set it down in front of the stage, and I put a sign on it that said, "Do not eat the brownies." And man, they walked in, and we're having brownies tonight. Can I have one? I'm like, not yet. I'll give you a chance to have a brownie later. Don't eat the brownies. And for the most part, people didn't eat the brownies when they were sitting there like that. Nobody touched them. So I go and I'm preaching this message, and I'm talking about sin, and I'm talking about how, we know that certain things will lead to death. If you go bungee jumping without the bungee, that will lead to death. Why don't you do that? Because you know it will kill you. Okay, so I get all this. So what is the deal? Why is it? So I said, all right, everybody get your brownies. So I passed out the brownies. Don't eat them yet. Passing out the brownies. Everybody has their brownie. And all right. Now, before you eat the brownie, I'm going to tell you what I did. And I tell them what ingredient I added to the brownies. And I said, I don't know when it's all mixed together, if all that poop is over in one corner or if it's evenly dispersed throughout the whole batch. But how many of you are willing to take that chance right now? How many of you are willing to eat that poop brownie? And they were like, no, ooh, that's gross. Why would you do that? Except the one kid that was like, huh? What was in the brownies? There was always the one kid. And he's still alive, so I guess he did okay. But that was the point of that, and why they remembered it was, we know if we partake in something as disgusting as that, we will die. Yet because it's packaged in a way that is the aroma is pleasing, that the taste is good, we ignore the fact that it's going to send us to be eternally separated from God. But we partake because it's good for us right now. And what we need to do is bring ourselves to a place where our own heart is pure, where we are concerned with the heart of others, and we are helping them get to where they need to be, and we are pursuing the perfection of purity in the lives of everyone around us. When you find purity by the power of God, not just moral purity, but when God begins to change your heart and you stop desiring what you once desired, you will begin to desire the things that matter to God and the things that He wants for you. You won't want the nasty brownies. You will want what God is giving you. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. That is what we want, is to see God. When you have purity of heart, you will see God in a way that you never have before. Look, we know that if we were to step into eternity, there's one of two places we will end up. We'll get to see God. You can either see God by being at the feet of Jesus, worshiping him in eternity, or we can look at the parable that Jesus told of the rich man and Lazarus. Lazarus was in hell, and he looked up and was able to see, rich man was in hell, and he was able to look up and see Lazarus the beggar, not Jesus' friend Lazarus, but he was able to see Lazarus the beggar in Abraham's bosom. He was able to see him up there, and he said, would he just dip his finger in water and touch my tongue to relieve me of this torment? No. Well, will he go tell my family, send someone to tell my family not to live like I did, but to care for the poor and to listen to Jesus? And they're like, look, they had Moses and the prophets. If they don't listen to them, they ain't going to listen to anybody. So we will see God one way or the other. We will see him from the midst of our torment, or we will see him by experiencing his fullness. But I'm telling you this morning, you don't have to wait till eternity to see God. You will not be able to live in his presence with our flesh, because our flesh is mortal, our flesh is corruptible, and that cannot live in God's presence. But his presence that he has given us on earth through his Spirit, we can experience him. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Ezekiel 36:26, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you the heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. That's what I want. I don't want the things of this world that make me callous. I don't want the things that, that's just normal now. Well, that the new normal, I know they're acting like that. I know that they're living in that way, but that's just how things are now. The world is a different place. I don't want that to keep me, to keep pulling me into the place where my heart is hardened. I don't want the light to grow dimmer and dimmer and dimmer in my life to where I'm used to the darkness. There's a standard of righteousness that we cannot achieve on our own. And it takes the power and the goodness of our God through Jesus Christ in order to experience it. And when we seek him and when we know him, and we're not just Christian in name only, but we're living Christ-centered lives, we will achieve that pursuit of perfection. And suddenly the standard rises and the power of God gives us a new heart. And we're different. Blessed are the pure in heart. We need to be able to pray, God, help us to be pure in heart so we can see you and we can live like we've never lived before. We can see you like we've never seen you before. We're going to move.